My name's Adele Onyango and welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless. No, seriously, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Hello, welcome to episode 123. I like this episode. 123. See what I did there? Okay, I'm sorry, really dumb jokes make me so happy. I am really happy that you listen to this podcast and that you find something to connect with, be it either something I've said or a storyteller or even the music. I am just so glad that there's something here for you and that we are really growing. It's so magical. If you are new to our space, we do have an Instagram page that I'd really love you to join. If you check the show notes, there's a link to it, but you can just search Legally Clueless Podcast on Instagram. You'll find us. If you want to tweet about this podcast, use the hashtag Legally Clueless. It makes it so much easier for me to stalk you. All right, we also have season 1 of our video series out on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes, there's a link to our YouTube channel there, or just search Legally Clueless on YouTube and watch 13 episodes full of powerful African stories. It's our latest baby and I really want you to check it out. And then the final thing that we're excited about here is Legally Clueless is going on tour. So excited. We are about 3 weeks away from actually hitting the road, leaving Nairobi, going to Nakuru, Kisumu, and Mombasa. And of course, we're going to flag off in Nairobi, which comes sooner, but I am just so excited. I will be recording some episodes while on the road, and I'm very interested to see how that's going to go. Yeah, so very excited about the tour, which of course we're doing in partnership with Africa No Filter. We got the grant from them to be able to do this. So excitement all round. Now that you're caught up in this particular episode, I'm excited about the story because it's so refreshing to hear somebody talk about business in such an honest way. Listen to this.
My husband would tell me when we were going to go and see different restaurant sites, he said, maybe you should stay at home because he's fairer than I am. When they see a person of color, you can see physically facial changes with realtors because they were like, oh no, not a non-white person. As an African, Cape Town is my city, is my home, to actually experience that kind of sense of racism. And everybody said to me, Nadia, the restaurant's not going to work there because that particular street is known for being a very kind of white street. And I recall a couple of years ago, we had one of our clients not pay us for about 8 months, and we were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Credit cards are maxed out. The banks are phoning you and saying when are you going to pay your debt? And you start lying to the banks, and you're like, no, didn't you get the payment? My parents could see how I was really struggling financially. I had lost a lot of weight. When we opened the first restaurant, I fell pregnant. I remember I was writing a proposal going into labor, and the nurse was just like, can you please put the laptop down?
That is a story by Nadia, who is from Cape Town, South Africa, and that story is coming up a little later in this episode. However, let me break down 3 things. 2 are not so good. 1 is a really nice day I had yesterday, and it just dawned on me that for me to be able to disconnect, I need to completely disconnect from actual human beings and interacting with human beings. Oh my God, that sounds like humans are the weak link in my life. But yeah, so yesterday I had such an amazing Saturday, guys. I haven't had such a day in such a long time. And literally all I did was stay home, didn't interact with humans except Fal and Marley, who comes to help us with the cleaning at home. Only 2 people I interacted with, and Fal even disappeared the whole day to do his own things, and Mali finishes her work so quickly. So I was alone for most of the day, and it was so good. So I didn't even have to watch a series or watch a movie. It was just so good. So my disconnecting looks like not interacting with human beings. Yours could look like something different, but one thing's for sure, you've got to figure out how you can disconnect. It really resets your insides in a beautiful way. I feel really good right now because no humans. And then came today where I do not have electricity. In fact, I'm recording this and I have 16% battery on this laptop. I'm just hoping that everything works out. So KPLC, who are the electricity givers in Kenya, but do they really do that job well? Just decided that we don't need electricity and we were not scheduled for any maintenance today, but it went like clockwork at 9 a.m. And when it does that, I know it's gone until probably like 5, 6 p.m. So I'm trying to like think of the only positive thing about it, which is nobody's water pump is on as I'm recording this. But it sucks. It really sucks. And then the other thing that I wanted to share is something that I did this week when I was wearing my businesswoman hat. So I really don't have too many great experiences when it comes to working with advertising agencies based in Kenya. The relationship normally starts off really great and then it sours when it comes to payments. I do have some very amazing Kenyan advertising agencies or advertising agencies based in Kenya that I work with. And they know, because I will tell them, oh my God, you're so refreshing. It's great to work with you. And I just cherish those few. But one of them that has shown me stars. So how it works for advertising, let's say on the podcast, is a client can either come directly to me, or they sometimes have an advertising agency working for them. So that agency does all the media buying and stuff like that. And so in November, one such situation happened, and it's a client who I really enjoy working with and have a really good relationship with. And they had this agency that I'd never worked with. I love contracts. I love clear terms in the contract. I love payment terms that stipulate a percentage before and a percentage after the completion of the campaign. So I should have known in hindsight that this is going to be tricks, because it was very hard to get that first payment in. I literally had to threaten not to show up for a particular engagement unless that first payment was done, which I hate doing, because honestly, money conversations aren't meant to be, what I think is they aren't meant to be awkward or strained, especially when both parties are transparent. Once you have your actual payment terms that you have both agreed on down on paper, money conversations shouldn't be strange, because there's no emotions there. They really should not be. Anyway, so that should have been my first red flag, but I was like, what if they pay the first installment, I can do all the production work and get things done. And it was on a campaign that I really truly believe is important. So now, that was in November, please. 8 months later, they hadn't paid the remaining percentage. And when I would reach out to the finance departments and stuff, it would either be like empty promises of silence. And I think a lot of small business owners, freelancers, can really identify with this issue. This, I think, I've been fortunate enough to have experienced this maybe 5 times in total. But I think what I hate about the process of asking for your payment is a lack of communication. Because, hey, sometimes shit happens. We're in a pandemic, shit happens in business. Communicate. You just have got to communicate. That for me is paramount. When you start going silent, that's pretty disrespectful to somebody's business and to themselves. So they would go silent, blah, blah, blah. And so this past week, I was just over it. And it all this time was not even about the amount of money or whatever. It was really like the disrespect. I was like, you're disrespecting my business that I love so much. And that is really so fulfilling, yes, but it's a lot of work and a lot has gone into setting this up, and it's still going into setting this up as a new media space. So because I know the client, just wrote an email and was like, this is ridiculous. Yeah, but I didn't say it as this is ridiculous. I said it in fancy English. And I think what was so sad is the client called me and they had no idea that this was happening. They were so saddened because it went against all the values that they stand for and the values that we were amplifying in this campaign. And all of a sudden, a day after that email, I got paid. The one person who had been ignoring my emails, as in had never even responded to even one of them, responded. I don't know if that made me feel even worse. Like, well, I was just like, so first, the money to pay me was there. Secondly, you were seeing my emails. I mean, I knew you were seeing them, but you responding now shows that you were seeing them. And I was just like, man, I don't know. There must be a way to run a business in an ethical manner and in a way that you respect those you're doing business with. So for me, if I cannot afford you, I am not going to I'm not going to engage you. And I try, and I think I do, because I can't even think of a situation where I haven't. But anyone I engage with or outsource things to or blah, 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 as soon as you send in that invoice, the payment goes out. That is me respecting our terms of engagement and respecting you and your business, or you and your talent. There must be a way to do things ethically, because I also wonder, when these companies engage with big suppliers, like suppliers who are like more established and big organizations, do they do the same thing, or is this something that you reserve for smaller business owners in business spaces that you probably think, oh, whatever, they don't need the money, or you just don't respect them? Like, I have so many questions around that, but ultimately it's disrespectful. But if you are also in the same space, I think it's so important, yes, have your contract with your payment terms clearly outlined. I mean, on the same day I was receiving this 8-month delayed payment, I was receiving a payment from another wonderful client who, in our agreement, we had the date of when to expect the payment, and they adhered to that. So you could be as specific in your contract as to the date you expect the payment. I think it's very important to know your client. Let's say if there's a third party in between you and your client, because sometimes the clients come directly and sometimes they have another entity representing them. It's important to know that client. It's important to have reserves if you're really running this as a business. So a percentage of what comes in, yes, you're paying yourself a salary. There is a percentage probably going to your overheads or whatever. There is a percentage that's going to your future projects that you probably want to do with your business. But I think a percentage needs to go to reserves, because what if that 8-month delayed payment was such a huge amount that it could cripple what I do on a day-to-day, which, by the way, was the case for Nadia, whose story is coming up, you know? So yes, reserves can only take you so far, but it's important to kind of like have them. And then I have a blacklist. I understand, yes, there is a sense of privilege in being able to actually have a blacklist and say, hey, I'm not going to work with these people. But I just think it's efficient. I have a blacklist of organizations that I will not work with because they do not respect my business. And so for me, it's like, I can't engage with you. I actually can't engage with you because, hey, maybe I might even use more money trying to get the money that you're meant to pay me. You know, that's actually a thing. And then secondly, man, the heartache and the turmoil. The stress, man. So yeah, I started that blacklist the beginning of last year. Definitely added this last organization on there. I think it's important. It's very important because there must be respect. And even if a payment is delayed, because sometimes shit happens, communication is so important. Yeah, so that was my week. I had business growth, character development. You know how they say when you date a horrible person, you look at it as character development. I had character development in a business sense. So let's jump into the song of the week, which I actually stumbled on this week. I was exploring different musicians and stumbled on FKJ, who, of course, I knew from Masego's Tado, but I think FKJ stands for French Kiwi Juice. Yes, French Kiwi Juice. I always find that to be so cool. And I stumbled on a song by FKJ called Joy, which is, just check it out. It brings such warmth to me. I just really wanted to share that with you, and I hope you like it as well. There's a link to the song in the show notes, or just go onto whatever music streaming app you use. Search Joy by FKJ. So let's jump into 100 African Stories, which in this episode is powered by the Gates Foundation, still on a high from being featured as a woman in business by the Gates Foundation around the Generation Equality Forum that happened a couple of weeks ago. And we were 3 African women who were featured, African women business owners, just to really spotlight some of the challenges we go through as women in business, the effects of the pandemic, and our general stories, you know? Because I think the 3 of us were fueled by passion. Myself didn't feel like I was really fulfilling my purpose on traditional radio and just like jumped out to set up this podcast. And Hawa, whose story you listened to in episode 121, really was passionate about fashion from such a young age. Nadia's story is going to blow you away. Now, as you listen to her story, remember you can check out all the features on gatesfoundation.org/ideas. I've put a link to that link in the show notes. 100 African stories on Legally Clueless, powered by the Gates Foundation as part of the Generation Equality Forum, promoting gender equality by turning interest and words into action.
I'm Nadia Musaji. I am a mother, a wife, an engineer, and an entrepreneur, and I live in Cape Town, South Africa. I've been in Cape Town the better part of my life. I've moved around, so I lived in Germany to finish my master's degree in engineering. I stayed for a little bit in Turkey, where I met my husband. But Cape Town is just one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. So first restaurant we opened in February 2016. So 5 years ago was the first one in Cape Town. Can't believe it's 5 years already in the industry. It's been a journey, to say the least. I'm an engineer and I do have an engineering company, but when my husband and I were deciding where we were going to live, at the time Turkey, I absolutely love Turkey, I love Istanbul, but it just wasn't as safe for us, and then we decided we were going to live in Cape Town. And we were like, my husband as an immigrant coming into the city, what is it that he could do? The easiest thing, I guess, maybe not the easiest thing, the craziest thing to do is become an entrepreneur, right? And he'd been in the food industry for, 13 years before that. And I absolutely love food. And I just felt that there wasn't really great, fully halal Turkish restaurants in Cape Town. And I said to him, Turkey doesn't need another restaurant, but Cape Town desperately needs one. There's such a big business opportunity. And that's really how, our story started in the restaurant industry, was really around a need for employment opportunity, but also just seeing a real gap in the market. And Adele, and I guess this is always the saddest part for me, being a woman of color in not just this business, but anyone. I recall when we were just opening, and I'd been to the World Economic Forum in Davos at the same year. It was in January, and we were negotiating with the landlord, and they didn't want to give us the site. They were like, no, we're not really interested, and we were actually buying a business, so they were almost forced to give us a lease as part of the business sale. I said, look, he set up a meeting. I said, look, I can't come on this date. I'm actually in Davos, but as soon as I get back, let's meet. And the first thing he said to me was, what were you doing in Davos? How dare you go there? And I was like, well, I was there for the World Economic Forum. And he was like, really, you? I was like, yes, really me. My husband would tell me when we were going to go and see different restaurant sites, he said, maybe you should stay at home because he's fairer than I am. And he's just like, when they see a person of color, you can see physically facial changes with realtors, because they were like, oh no, not a non-white person. And so it's been a real struggle as an African, as Cape Town is my city, is my home, to actually experience that kind of sense of racism when all you're trying to do is start a business is incredibly tough, but it's also really hard sore. Our money is good. It's the same kind of money like everybody else, and we have a good brand, we have a good business, and we have the money to pay for it, right? And so why should my skin color matter? And so for us, starting that up was, a real challenge to even just land a space in the restaurant industry. The space we eventually got was in a street, and everybody said to me, Nadia, the restaurant's not going to work there because that particular street is known for being a very kind of white street, a very alcohol-focused street. And I was coming in with a fully halal restaurant concept, no alcohol. They said, you're never going to survive. And I said, guys, you underestimate the buying power you have. I've done my numbers. I've got the business plan. I've got the business idea. This is going to work. And I had this kind of dogged faith in and belief that this has to work, right? Almost like the stubbornness about this vision. And here we are, 5 years in, and kind of almost 3 restaurants later. And I've spoken so much about the challenges of raising funding for female entrepreneurs. It is so much harder. Women typically, and me included, have bootstrapped our business for so much longer. I'm an engineer by background, and so I'd worked as an engineer. I had saved up so that I could actually invest in my own businesses rather than go to a bank. But because every time I go there, it's such a jarring experience. And I recall a couple of years ago, we had one of our clients not pay us for about 8 months. And we were, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. My business partner Hema and I were really like pulling out our hair. We didn't know where we were going to kind of get that money from. And when you're so heavily in debt and your credit cards are maxed out, the banks are phoning you and saying like, when are you going to pay your debt? And you start lying to the banks and you're like, no, didn't you get the payment? It's coming. I'm going to speak to my accountant. I'm going to speak to my accounts department, right? And we went to the bank and we had collateral because, we were in my engineering life and Hema in her engineering life, she was very smart and we made some investments into property. So we had collateral for the banks, except for the fact that this company hadn't paid us. We were really looking good in terms of, profit, etc. And we were just not good enough for the banks. And they said, no, sorry, we can't give you short-term loans. And it really broke my heart because I was just like, we've got collateral and we, eventually went to go and beg some friends and family to give us the money. But for me, that's always been the hardest thing is what about the female entrepreneurs who don't have engineering backgrounds and didn't invest in property, right? And for me, one of the hardest moments in that journey was my parents could see how I was really struggling financially. I had lost a lot of weight. I was very stressed out because of the financial strain that, the business was taking. And my mom and my dad, who have supported me through every crazy decision I have ever made in my life, sat me down. My dad and my mom said, maybe it's time to get a real job. And that gutted me because I've put my heart and soul into this. They've supported me through this. And they were trying to have that kind of tough love conversation with me. And just over financing, just because a bank couldn't see the potential because I was a woman, because I'm this entrepreneur who's got this crazy vision, I was just not bankable enough. And that for me, it broke me. It broke me in so many ways. It broke my business partner Hema in so many different ways. And it took us a long time to actually get back. And eventually my dad gave us, the money to cover the debt. And, eventually the company paid us. 8 months of hell is really what we went through, from a financial perspective. So juggling a family, 2 companies, I look back on it and I just go like, what was I thinking, right? So when we opened the first restaurant, I fell pregnant. All I remember was the smell of meat would just set me off and I would just bring on this nausea. But Turkish restaurants, all they do is serve meat, right? So I would be, really sick in the restaurants and we'd have, 16-hour days where, staff just wouldn't come to work. And in my other business as well, we were traveling, we were doing a lot, in growing our business. And I was pregnant and I didn't tell anybody, except, my close circle, because when a woman is pregnant, sometimes people, they with good intentions start to exit you from opportunities, right? And start to take things away from you. I was like, no, I want to make every choice on my own. Just because I'm pregnant doesn't mean, things should change for me. And I hid this pregnancy from my, from our clients, etc. And I remember after my son was born, January the next year, everybody went, where did this kid come from? And I was like, as I was pregnant the entire time, I was doing all these crazy things like running around the world and running a restaurant at the same time. I would not recommend it to anybody though. In hindsight, you should take the time. It was a really tough pregnancy. I was doing like physiotherapy and occupational therapy like 4 or 5 times a week. And towards the end, it was just horrendous. And I think it talks to about resilience, right? As an entrepreneur, I guess we sometimes, give everything for this dream. And, as I get older, I guess wiser, you also got to do this whole thing that they call self-care and self-love, right? And, I could probably write a book of how I haven't done it, but I think it's really important to actually just take the time. I remember I was writing a proposal going into labor, right? I was in the hospital and the nurse was just like, can you please put the laptop down? And I was just like, I'm almost done. Don't recommend it to anybody. Take the time off. 2020 was, I think, will probably go down in history as the year that the world fundamentally changed in ways that I don't think anybody could have anticipated. And being in the restaurant industry and the hospitality industry as a whole, it's taken such a big knock. And at the time, March 2020 rolled in South Africa, we had 2 restaurants. And suddenly, within 4 days' notice, our government goes, full lockdown, you're not allowed to go outside, all businesses have to close unless you're a retail store. And I go, what are we going to do with the restaurants and our staff? We don't have, huge margins in the industry. We don't have the ability to sustain all the expenses. And I go, what are we also going to do about our staff, right? Because we've got 2 restaurants now. And we speak to our landlords, and the one landlord is like, don't pay any rent, he's such a gem. And the other one goes, I want every single cent paid or you're evicted, and starts threatening. And then we go, where are we going to fund staff salaries from, right? And we took some loans, some bank loans. We literally took money from an organization that was giving out soft loans to pay for our staff salaries so that we could at least have some support for our staff. And we got food hampers and, to distribute some food hampers to staff. It was one of the hardest things was to close one of the restaurants. And it was a decision because we actually just didn't have the funding to be able to sustain 2 over a long-term period. And I think that's, the hardest thing as an entrepreneur is that you didn't do anything wrong, right? It was literally you were a victim of an environmental cause. And we started consolidating, and we tried to, cut as much as possible without, in the most humane way possible. For me and my husband, we had so many conversations, and I think it's what's harder for me as I've been a gender activist my whole life, and I know a lot of our staff are women in the restaurants, and they're single-headed households, and it's not just like we're going to let the staff member go. It's like, I'm going to let this person go, but then what happens to the entire family, right? Because she's supporting everybody. So I think it was probably one of the hardest decisions to take on who to keep and who not to keep. And what we said to our staff was, we absolutely love you guys. This is a really tough situation for all of us, and when the restaurants open again, we will bring you back. The philosophy is, try and do this in the most humane way possible. And the issues of pressure and stress, and I always think that, I guess, motherhood has really taught me how to deal with that in sleep deprivation, all of those things. I always say, if you don't actually take care of yourself, it starts to manifest physically as well. And so, your hair starts to fall out, you just feel unhealthy. And I'm the kind of person who used to never run and exercise. I always used to say, if you see me running, then you run faster because something is chasing me, right? So just be careful. And I had to kind of completely flip that and start to take care of myself. Physically as well as mentally and emotionally. And my business partner, Hema, and I, what we would do, and this was like pre-COVID, we would do a retreat every year. And I think that is so important, especially with business partners. We would go to, an island somewhere where we were cut off from most things. We would go and really treat ourselves, get massage, and then really have that time away to rethink what was important for us in our lives. And we used to do this every single year. And I think that's really important is that, that self-care piece, right? To be able to kind of re-energize, everybody says you can't fill other people's cups if your cup is empty. And this year specifically, I've really focused on how do I make sure that my cup gets filled as well so that I can fill others' cups more. And I think that's really important for entrepreneurs to think about. I have the restaurants. Also, I have a company that supports education and training in the engineering and tech industry. And we work all along the engineering value chain, from attraction, so how do we get girls excited about engineering careers, to ownership. How do we support female founders in STEM businesses? And it's science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing. And we used to run programs all the time, and it was all in person. In 2019, I traveled like 120 days of the year in different, in 22 countries running different programs. I said to my business partner, Hema, this isn't sustainable for us, just because, never mind our carbon footprints here, but I'm exhausted. I'm tired of traveling. And I'm really sorry that I put that out of the universe, and the universe answered with lockdown. But in December 2019, we embarked on a Go Digital strategy, because she'd been traveling like 300 days of the year, and it just wasn't sustainable for either of us or our team members. And we started converting our programs to digital programs, online learning, and we weren't sure the receptivity, because people were just so used to running training programs for the engineering and tech industry in person and having having big conferences and having big programs. And so I always think we were a little bit ahead of the curve, because while we had designed all of these and we were about to put it out to market, suddenly, pandemic hits in March, and we have 4 months of already having developed and tested things online already. And so we're ready to go in a digital space. And I think, that first mover advantage gave us an incredible head start in the industry that we work around learning and development. And I always think about, how you've got to be really agile in this market to be able to rethink your business. And that was in WOMHub and our education side, but even within the restaurants, right? Suddenly we weren't able to open for customers. We weren't able to see people in the restaurant and give them that experience. And so we sat down and we went, how is it that we create this dining experience at home? And a restaurant that was not really focused on delivery, suddenly, I'm setting up a website, I'm setting up like a Shopify account online so that you can buy food, and setting up a whole delivery system, just because, the current delivery systems like through Uber and Mr. Delivery that we currently use is quite expensive. They take 30%, which, that's our margins right there. So, having to like really rethink, not even think out of the box, redefine the box here is what we did to be able to actually be super agile and creative in a pandemic situation. Honestly, during the pandemic, financing has been a big challenge, right? There's all this promise of government grants and SMME funds to help SMMEs survive. And we applied for every bit of money and didn't get it. And I guess we live in countries where there's a huge need, but also, to be quite frank, there's, gross inequality and corruption that happened. And so, there was something like, 500 million for SMMEs, and not sure how that got spent and who that got spent on, but we weren't the ones who got that. We did get some funding from a trust who basically made R1 billion available. And but that is a loan that we've got to pay back, and that was specifically to cover staff salaries. And so we said we're not taking salaries, our staff gets paid first, and through that loan money. And then and I always think that it's the nature of entrepreneurship, especially when you're a serial entrepreneur, right? Because the restaurant is struggling, but my company WOMHub is doing really well, right? So we initially consolidated and we said, okay, cash is king, reserve our cash. We're not going to expand anything. We're going to try and make sure that we weather the storm. We don't know how long the storm is going to last for. After that kind of consolidation and real focus phase, suddenly we're doing really well. And so, I didn't have to worry about, financially, my personal finances, because my WOMHub is thriving, and the restaurants we're going, okay, how do we, move money around? How is it that we dip into savings and reserves across the board to, to keep the restaurants afloat? And, I think that those kind of decisions, nobody teaches you that at school, right? It's all like trial and error, and I wish we were able to kind of get better financial skills for young people and for entrepreneurs and for older people, right? To be able to manage our money better. And that's literally what we did. We just kind of kept moving money around, in this kind of very circular way across our entrepreneurial ventures to make sure that, we met all our demands, all the payments that we needed to do, and the end, come out on top. And when you talk about having hopes and optimism for the future, and I have to laugh at this because in a pandemic situation, we went into lockdown in March. In September, we opened a new restaurant. And we're about to open another restaurant in the waterfront, which is kind of a very prestigious location here in Cape Town. Why I'm optimistic on the hospitality side and on the restaurant side is now is really the time to invest, because you can get incredible deals. People are way more negotiable about rental. Landlords who hadn't seen rental in months, suddenly you come here with a really good concept, and suddenly cash is way more important than all the other prejudice that they had before. And so I think we've really used the pandemic to our advantage in terms of expansion. So we went through a really kind of tough 3 or 4 months in the industry, and now we're going, what does that horizon look like? How do we grow and expand our operations in a way that is really strategic for us? And then the same with WOMHub, we went through that kind of early consolidation phase. We spoke to all our clients and our customers. We helped them, align with a new strategy that was digital, and we became the trusted partners and advisors in helping them also leapfrog, through some of the challenges that the pandemic had created that they weren't also used do. Both sides, it's around investing now because this is actually the right time to do so. I think it's going to be incredible when we're already starting to see this in the restaurant industry, where people are really tired of eating their own cooked food and suddenly they want to go out. And I think, a lot of people are missing those human connection points. And so we're starting to see that growth in a way that has been really surprising and interesting. And of course, we've, still got to be quite cautious because, there is still a pandemic. And, so, in terms of being able to share some like really good advice, and I always think about, what is it that I would have loved to have, learned or knew before, and what kind of insider info would I have loved to have had? And, the first one really is when we took the leap from, having engineering day jobs to being full-time entrepreneurs, we said we were going to have 6 months of salary in the bank. And that's just so that we can cover ourselves, so that we didn't have to worry about our own costs. We needed more than the 6 months. So think about, what your savings and your reserves look like when you're going all in with your entrepreneurial ventures. Because, the challenge around raising capital is a real challenge. And especially because sometimes women become martyrs for our causes. I always used to say, I don't need a salary. I'm doing this because I'm really passionate about it. But suddenly you've got a kid and they need nappies and formula and clothes every 6 months, and suddenly that kind of discussion around finances is not appropriate anymore, right? So make sure you pay yourself. The second one is really about being strategic around opportunities. And, when you're going in, look, there's no guarantee in business, right? We could open up the new restaurant and it could fail in 6 months, right? 95% of restaurants fail within a year. But it's really about, how do you spot your niche? A lot of people said, Nadia, a fully halal Turkish restaurant concept in Cape Town will not work, right? You have to serve alcohol. And I said, no, just fundamentally, I don't really, want that for my restaurants. And I think that there's a huge market opportunity. And we never wavered in 6 years of the vision of, a fully halal concept. And we've grown. And organizations and restaurants where they were like, no, we're going to have both, have faltered. And so really, stick to your vision and your dream, because sometimes there's something there, there's this little voice inside. And sometimes we want to say, no, everybody else is right, this voice is wrong. But actually that is kind of your guiding light into thinking, and it knows things that maybe you don't really want to realize. And so listen to that inner voice. There's lots of wisdom there. And then I think the last piece is really strategically surround yourself with incredible people. I would not be able to do what I do today if I didn't have an entire village supporting me. From my business partner, Hema, who is, my husband knows this. So my husband and I are, business partners in the restaurants, and Hema and I are business partners in Wimhub and a number of other ventures. But he knows that Hema's my soulmate. And that's just because we get each other so completely, right? I feel like women, we all need to find our tribe and our soulmates. We're there to support each other. When I had my child, it was this tribe that really got me through the sleepless nights, who took care of things when I wasn't able to take care of it, when I wasn't at peak performance. And I think that's really where we need to think about, forming, we called it a sisterhood, we called it a tribe, but whatever it is, surround yourself with incredible people. And, it's really about finding incredible people to make your job easier. Because I always say, if you're an entrepreneur and you have to be in your business 100% of the time to make it work, then you've just created a job for yourself. But if you can have multiple companies running at the same time, and you can be sitting on a beach in Bali, then you are truly an entrepreneur. This pandemic has really taken its toll on women, and we need to recognize that we actually may have gone a few steps back in terms of gender parity and gender equality, right? Because when we all were shut down and we were all at home and schools were closed, it meant that women were suddenly educators and teachers. And even though the classes were on Zoom classes, luckily my son is 4, so he doesn't go to school. I've got friends who suddenly had to go and learn calculus and algebra because they had to go and teach it to their kids. We live in a fortunate society where we have home care and home support, right? But suddenly, my home helper wasn't able to come in, and so suddenly household chores became, a woman's responsibility. And then when people got sick, women started looking after the sick as well. And so suddenly, we had one job or two jobs, and suddenly we've got all the jobs on our plate, right? We need to recognize that the burden of care is a real burden, that unpaid work is really skewed in our societies, especially on the continent, but actually around the world, where we have patriarchal societies, where there's an expectation that women are going to do the cooking, the cleaning, the looking after kids, plus have the career, plus. It's exhausting. It really is. And so, my plea has always been, let's put women in the center of economic recovery, because when women are economically empowered, more money flows into their households. And so that enables, equal education for girls, that enables, higher income on households and better consumer spending on different things. I think the number that they throw around is $5 trillion gets added to the economy when women are equally empowered, right? But that empowerment also means that we need to really speak to our guys in our lives and go, hey, look, buddy, we're equally in this boat here. I've spoken a lot about this, especially in patriarchal society, and as I've got a lot of pushback around, we should be telling men to actually, empower themselves and pick up the load. And I think that's really important. So when we talk about women's economic empowerment, we need to also empower our men to be able to pick up the slack. When I think about like gender equality, I always think about my husband and I, because when we got married, everybody said, Nadia, you're going to stop traveling because you got married, right? And I said, no, I don't think so. And then they said, when I had my son, they said, oh, now you're going to stop traveling, right? Because now you're married and you have a child. And then I didn't stop, right? Because, I had to work. Between my husband and I, he cooks way better than I do. I mean, actually, he's the operator in the restaurant. He's the person at the back end. I just manage the finances and growth. And he's literally the one who's making sure that every meal that comes out to a customer's table is excellent. We said when we got married, we would redefine the roles for ourselves. And I think that's true equality, is when you can say, you know what, I like these things and I don't like those things, and I get to make those choices every day for myself. And so, if you want to be a mom who stays at home because that's what you want to do for your kids, nobody should take that away from you. And if you want to be a mom who works and who has a nanny, and that's cool, nobody should take that away from you. And if you're a woman who doesn't want to have kids and you want to have fur babies, that's great as well. There should be no judgment for whatever women want to do, want to wear, and want to aspire to. And I think that is true equality.
Visit gatesfoundation.org/ideas to be part of the Generation Equality Convos. Get involved and watch inspiring stories by women from across the globe. Gates Foundation, act for equal. I am so honored and happy that I got to have Nadia share her story, not only with me, but with you as well. And I'm thankful to the Gates Foundation for making it happen, just because she's so refreshingly honest. I also really love that, yes, she's talking about the challenges that she's gone through, but also that in a crisis like the pandemic, she's been able to see business opportunities as well. It's kind of balanced. Like, we're talking about challenges, but also about growth and how to move our businesses to the next level. So if you want to watch, and I really think you should watch Nadia's full feature, go to gatesfoundation.org/ideas. And of course, I've put a link to that in the show notes. And when you get there, you will not only be able to see Nadia's feature, Hawa's feature, my feature as well, but also to understand in terms of data, just how the pandemic has and is affecting women across the world. We see a lot of conversation, especially here, when we talk about women's rights. People are like, oh, we've done enough for women. They're okay now. Now we need to look at the boy child. I'm not saying that we don't need to figure out certain issues that are affecting young men and boys, but we are far from solving the very many issues that are affecting young girls and women as well. And this pandemic just pushed it to a whole new level. So if you go to gatesfoundation.org/ideas, you'll get to understand more of the data, and then obviously watch 3 powerful features from 3 powerful African women. Do remember you can catch this podcast on Trace Radio in Kenya. Just go to traceradio.co.ke for a list of all the frequencies, and you can stream the podcast there as well. Well, Trace Radio there as well. And also head over to our Instagram page, because that's where I'll be posting most of the Legally Clueless tour updates. So if you are in Nakuru, Kisumu, or Mombasa, we will be in your counties, and I'm just so excited. I feel like that's the one thing whenever I'm getting frustrated by something, I just focus on, okay, can you imagine we're actually doing this? You started your podcast and it was something you really wanted to do on a bigger scale, and now you're doing it. And the reason I talk about things that frustrate me, just earlier I was trying to get a hold of the guy who we're getting the transport from, and he wasn't picking. I was so irritated. I'm just like, dude, pick up your damn phone. But anyway, got a hold of him, so that's cool. I would say planning a tour, it's not difficult. There are very many moving parts, that's all. But it's possible, and I'm really looking forward to it. So I need to end the podcast here because of my neighbor's kids, honestly. Not the fact that, it's getting to be a bit of a long episode. No, these 3 boys are so loud and so noisy and so wild. I don't believe I've ever encountered kids this wild. And I know kids will be kids. So I try not to tell them to keep quiet, but I have devised a plan. So one of my neighbor's daughters, who doesn't stay in the country, is visiting, and she has a puppy, and she keeps the puppy outside so it can run around and all of that. I discovered a couple of days ago that these 3 kids are scared shitless of this dog. So I can't believe I'm admitting to this. I did meet her, the dog owner, in the car park, and like when I was coming back and she was leaving at the same time, I can't remember. And I told her dog is so wonderful and I can see how he's growing so well. Must be all the running outside, and he's really socializing well with people. And that it's really good for dogs to be outdoors. Listen, I know it's evil, but you see, the dog doesn't bark much. So I would rather the dog be outside than the kids. So yeah, I need to end because she's probably going to move her. Yeah, the kids are out, meaning the dog has been moved in. So this episode has to end. Thank you so much for listening to this episode to the very end. Remember, audio episodes go out every single Monday, and their mom is I think their mom is fed up of their noise as well. Oh man, their mom is not happy with them. Okay, let's get back to this. And remember, you can watch season 1 of our video series on our Legally Clueless YouTube channel. There is a link to it in the show notes. And very soon, there will be more video episodes from the tour. That's it for this episode of Legally Clueless. You can share this podcast with your friends. You can keep it for yourself. I'm not judging. Just make sure you're here next week for the next episode.